He arrived outside the court. He and members of his family waved to the crowd. The mother is to undergo questioning by defense lawyers who are seeking to exclude some evidence before the case goes to trial. That's scheduled for January. The hearing on disputed evidence began on Thursday.
Well, Patrick Snell will be along with the latest from the world of sport after the break.
This information was leaked through transcripts in a grand jury proceeding, where neither my lawyers nor I ever appeared. The information is disgusting and false.
The leaks came out in an ABC News report earlier this month, quoting alleged grand jury testimony. The leaks included lurid allegations from Jackson's accuser of what went on behind closed doors between the boy and Jackson at the singer's Neverland ranch early in 2003. Allegations Jackson denies.
Please keep an open mind and let me have my day in court. I deserve a fair trial like every other American citizen.
The self-proclaimed king of pop is facing a total of 10 counts, ranging from child molestation to conspiracy to commit child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion. Jackson has pleaded not guilty to all the charges.
I will be acquitted and vindicated when the truth is told.
Because of the gag order on the case, Jackson's statement had to be approved by trial judge Rodney Melville. CNN asked the prosecutors for a reaction, but citing that same gag order, the prosecution declined to comment. Sarah Dorsey, CNN, Atlanta.
7 counts of molestation and 2 counts of giving alcohol to a minor.
We've filed formal charges, a felony criminal complaint against Mr. Jackson.
And then Michael Jackson was arraigned for the first time. At what looked more like a concert than an arraignment, Jackson pleaded not guilty. As the months wore on, so did the investigation. Santa Barbara District Attorney Tom Sneddon convened a grand jury to hear evidence massed against the pop star and to consider new charges.
This case is about one thing only: the complete vindication of a wonderful human being named Michael Jackson.
When the grand jury handed up 10 counts, Jackson had a new lawyer and a new arraignment. He also had a new problem. In addition to molestation, Jackson was now charged with conspiring to imprison and extort his accuser and his family.
I want to thank the community of Santa Maria. I want you to know that I love the community of Santa Maria very much.
Jackson was now facing the reality that 12 people from a small town on California's Central Coast would soon be deciding his future. A year later, after almost 24 pretrial hearings and over 100 search warrants executed against Jackson, the showdown is set for the pop star versus the prosecutor.
Now, these jurors, the 750 jurors, they are going to fill out a questionnaire that both sides, defense and prosecution, will pour through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then next week, they will start questioning the jurors to figure out which 12 plus 8 alternates can spend the 4 to 6 months to be on this trial. Jackson is expected to be here today by himself, no entourage because of space considerations in the courtroom. Back to you.
Beyond the ability to actually serve on the jury for such a long period of time, surely there must be concerns about finding a jury who hasn't heard all the claims and counterclaims already about this case in the media.
Well, that's going to be the difficult part. They have a 7-page questionnaire with yes or no answers that they have to fill out. That will give them, the lawyers on both sides, some sense of the juror knowledge of this case. Northern Santa Barbara County, it's a very rural place. Santa Maria is a fairly small town, farming community, ranching community, fairly conservative area of California. So it's not likely that a lot of people are really tuning in, the hardcore Jackson fans tuning into it. But the question will be, you know, can the defense as well find jurors that they find suitable, who they believe aren't overly conservative and sort of law and order types? Back to you.
Miguel Marquez, thank you.
Among the charges facing Jackson: child molestation, administering an intoxicating agent, conspiracy to commit child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion. In a statement issued at the weekend, Michael Jackson denied the charges and said leaks from the grand jury were, quote, disgusting and false, unquote. And we will bring you more on this in about 20 minutes in a live report. And we will be back with more of Your World Today after this.
conservative law and order types, people who may have kids, people who may be concerned about kids, work in those sort of professions. The defense may be looking or hoping that they can find sort of a more anti-government set up here. There was wrangling in the courtroom during all the pretrial hearings that the defense wanted to be able to refer to the prosecution as the government, and the people or the prosecution felt that that was a pejorative term. So it seems hopeful that at least it seems that the defense hopes that they can find sort of those anti-government or distrustful government types that may end up siding with Michael Jackson. Of course, that's the other question. Just because you may not like the government, would you then side with Michael Jackson?
Yeah,
Michael?
Yeah, complex. Miguel Marquez, thanks so much, and we will keep everyone informed when the man himself arrives. Let's turn.
Multiple charges of child molestation. On the eve of the trial in California, Jackson issued a statement maintaining his innocence and appealing for justice.
In the last few weeks, a large amount of ugly, malicious information has been released into the media about me. Apparently, this information was leaked through transcripts in a grand jury proceeding, where neither my lawyers nor I ever appeared. The information is disgusting and false.
The jury will have to decide whether the goings-on at the Star's Neverland Ranch were innocent or a dark pattern of child sex abuse. Well, Miguel Marquez joins us now with the very latest. And Miguel, it has to be asked, with all of this exposure, how likely is it that Michael Jackson will get a fair trial here?
Well, it's, the judge, the last pretrial hearing last week, he admonished or talked to both lawyers sort of from his heart. It was the first time we'd seen that from this judge, and he said, everybody, I want you to take a breath. I've noticed it with myself, I've noticed it with the jurors, or with my staff, and I've noticed it with you. Everybody be calm and realize that the entire world is watching. Not just Santa Maria, not just Santa Barbara County, not just California, but the entire world is watching Santa Maria, and they're watching the U.S. system of justice, is the way he put it. And he seemed concerned by what you're seeing on your screen now. Mr. Jackson showing up here. It is a very, very high-profile trial. The charges are very, very serious, and Mr. Jackson could go to jail for a very long time if justice does not prevail in this. So I think the judge is concerned about that, and everything is being done to make sure that Mr. Jackson does get a fair trial. That being said, the process is 750 jurors will make their way through the courtroom today, and they hope to be able to get 12 jurors and 8 alternates from those 750 jurors that we will be able to serve the 4 to 6 months that this trial will take. Before they will be selected as jurors, they'll have to fill out a 7-page questionnaire, and then they will be questioned by both sides, defense and prosecution, as to their ability to be on this jury.
Given that, what will the defense and prosecution be looking for in each side in those jurors? Because everyone will have heard of Michael Jackson, and no doubt everyone's already made up their minds as to his guilt or innocence.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult, obviously. Everybody has heard about Michael Jackson. Everybody sort of grew up listening to his music. We're listening to his music right now as his fans are out here. Certainly, from what we can tell, prosecutors will be looking for jurors who, the typical, the law and order types. They may be looking for people who are in professions of child care, for people who have children, for people who may be concerned about children. Mr. Jackson's lawyers, on the other hand, it's a very conservative area up here. They may be looking for people who may be considered anti-government or libertarian in their politics, people who might not be so willing to trust the government and believe that the government has built this entire case against Mr. Jackson and portray him as a guy who has just gotten railroaded. Rosemary?
All right, Miguel Marquez watching the jury selection as it takes place today. Thanks for that, Miguel.
The singer arriving for trial in Santa Maria in California, waving to crowds of fans pressing for a glimpse of their idol. Many vehemently assert his innocence in the face of multiple charges of child molestation. Those charges include plying a child with alcohol, conspiracy to commit child abduction, and false imprisonment. Well, on the eve of that trial, Jackson issued a statement attempting to dispel months of lurid speculation and leaks. In it, he maintains his innocence and called for a fair trial.
In the last few weeks, a large amount of ugly, malicious information has been released into the media about me. Apparently, this information was leaked through transcripts in a grand jury proceeding, where neither my lawyers nor I ever appeared. The information is disgusting and false.
And now the first task of the court is to select jury members. Their job will be to decide whether the events behind closed doors at Jackson's Neverland Ranch were innocent or a dark pattern of child sex abuse. Joining us now with more on what the prosecution as well as the defense are looking for in jurors is Court TV's Lisa Bloom. Lisa, first of all, let's try to figure out exactly what they're going to look for, because obviously everyone wants to pick people who are going to take their side, if you will.
Well, that's right. I think the prosecution wants people who are passionate, who are grassroots activist type people, and above all else, people who care deeply about children. You know, think Aaron Brockovich meets Angelina Jolie, someone who's really going to step out there and take the side of the prosecution, not only during the trial, but during jury deliberations.
Well, with that in mind, though, what about the question of impartiality? Because at the end of the day, they're supposed to make a decision based on the facts presented. However, every single newspaper worth its salt has been talking about Michael Jackson, every TV station covering it. How are they going to be able to make an impartial decision?
Well, and you're right. You know, it's not just Michael Jackson on trial. I think the American criminal justice system is really on trial as well. You know, the world is watching this case. We're not looking for jurors that have never heard of Michael Jackson or have never heard that he's been accused of molestation. That would be ridiculous. Instead, though, we're looking for people who can really be fair-minded, who can decide the case based on the evidence. And that's true in any high-profile case. You know, study after study shows that jurors tend to rise to the occasion. They may have heard some press reports, but once they get into that deliberation room,
but Lisa, this is in reality, though, a situation where most people aren't really indifferent when it comes to Michael Jackson. It seems that most people either love him or can't stand him.
Well, I think that's true, but most people aren't going to be on this jury. They only need 12. You know, they've called 750 so far just to come down for questioning. Many are called, but few are chosen. They only need 12 ultimately, plus a couple of alternates. I think they'll be able to get 12 fair-minded people in Santa Maria, California.
All right, well, looking at the information that has been leaked, and of course, let's point out that it has been leaked, it seems that the prosecutors have a fair amount of material evidence against Michael Jackson. What is it that is going to be working for the defense here?
Well, the best single piece of evidence the defense has is this boy's denial when he was interviewed privately by a social worker around the time of these incidents that he now says happened. He said nothing happened. He said Michael Jackson is like a father figure to me. He's been very good to me and my family. When asked point blank if he'd been touched inappropriately by Michael Jackson, he said no. So the prosecution has to explain why later on he changed his position and indeed said that Michael Jackson molested him.
Lisa, as always, good to have you join us. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much.
Time now for us to check the international weather forecast.
For that, we turn to Femi Oke. She's at the International Weather Centre. Femi.
Hello there to you both. The weather this weekend in Illinois was perfect for...
Maria waving to the crowds of fans, pressing for a glimpse of their idol. Many vehemently assert his innocence in the face of multiple charges of child molestation. Those charges include plying a child with alcohol, conspiracy to commit child abduction and false imprisonment. On the eve of the trial, Jackson issued a statement attempting to dispel months of lurid speculation and leaks. In it, he maintained his innocence and called for a fair trial.
In the last few weeks, a large amount of ugly, malicious information has been released into the media about me. Apparently, this information was leaked through transcripts in a grand jury proceeding, where neither my lawyers nor I ever appeared. The information is disgusting and false.
Of course, the first stages of that trial are the selection of juries. That's beginning Monday. That's a quick look at some of the other stories making news around the world. I'm Dumi Makhabo. Now, a special edition.
A jury of the singer's peers may be a difficult task in more ways than one.
Jason Carroll reports on the difficulties of ensuring a fair trial in a case preluded by months of leaks and speculation.
My children and me.
It all seems so familiar. Sunday, on the eve of his trial, Michael Jackson released a statement on the internet.
And I have great faith in our justice system. Please keep an open mind and...
In fact, we have seen Jackson do this before. In 1993, after a teenage boy accused him of sexual molestation, Jackson released a 4-minute statement proclaiming his innocence. The following year, an out-of-court settlement of the ensuing lawsuit reportedly cost Jackson $20 million. Michael Jackson's been on everyone's cultural radar since he was a little boy. We all know his songs. His music videos like Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller were the must-see TV of the 80s and 90s. Society can forgive celebrities for being eccentric, but sometimes the arc of celebrity goes through a crash and burn phase. Billions of people around the world saw Michael Jackson's looks change and his behavior change, and many made up their minds. In New York,
I wouldn't be able to be objective.
In Los Angeles,
the possibility of people getting on the jury that are already biased to Michael's guilt, it's inevitable.
maybe not. Here's what the law requires.
Michael Jackson is not entitled to a jury of other pop stars. That's not what jury of your peers means. It simply means a fair jury from the community that will keep an open mind and decide the case on the evidence.
The task of finding jurors is done during a process called voir dire. That's when attorneys on both sides can question potential jurors about their ability to be impartial. That process in the Jackson case could take up to 2 weeks.
It will be challenging, and it will be very important for them to be asking detailed questions of people about what they do know and what they've thought about what they know, so that they get not only a sense of what information people have collected, but how they've passed judgment on it if they have.
Julie Blackman is a jury consultant who has worked on high-profile cases such as Martha Stewart and hotel heiress Leona Helmsley. Her advice to attorneys in the Jackson case?
I think they have to talk to the jurors about the importance of separating the press reports from what happens in the courtroom.
And the press reports are sure to keep coming.
Connection with a child molestation case. Prosecution and defense attorneys are whittling away at the pool of prospective jurors. Joining us now with more is Miguel Marquez, who joins us from outside the county courthouse in Santa Maria, California. Miguel.
Good morning, Shihab. Much different feel out here in Santa Maria this morning. The fan base certainly isn't as large, just a handful, maybe 15, 20 people out here. Some of them appear to have spent the night, but it's not entirely sure of that. Certainly yesterday, though, was sort of vintage Michael Jackson, what we've come to expect from court appearances from him. He was wearing his now trademark white, seems to be his thing for court these days, but he was without any members of his family because of space considerations in the courthouse. His family members weren't able to attend. A spokeswoman with the family said that many of them came in from all over the country to attend this and were quite upset that they were not able to be with him in court. Now, once in court, though, according to reporters who were in there, reporters are also limited by the number we can have in court. They said that he was relaxed and confident before the jurors got in. He was joking with his attorneys, even said hello to the court reporter while he was in there. But once the jurors entered and the prosecution entered, he was all business, something that we haven't seen a lot or don't expect out of Mr. Michael Jackson, I suppose. 300 potential jurors cycled through the courthouse yesterday. More than half said that they would be able to serve for the 6 months of the trial if it goes that long. Another 300 jurors will cycle through today. They will all fill out a 7-page questionnaire, and then based upon that questionnaire, next week, the lawyers for both the prosecution and the defense will begin to question them in very small groups to figure out who are the 12 jurors and the 8 alternates who will eventually judge Michael Jackson. Shihab?
How much of an issue is race in the selection of a jury in this case?
It hasn't become a big issue of race. It's been sort of an underlying issue. There was a time early on in the process when Mr. Jackson had aligned himself closely with the Nation of Islam, you know, sort of a black activist group, and there seemed to be a racial overtone growing, a very strong one. But in recent months, that has certainly faded away, and with this jury, there's been no suggestion on the part of the defense that race is an issue. There is a back issue with the grand jury that indicted Mr. Jackson, and whether or not that grand jury was drawn from a truly random pool, or were blacks and Hispanics discriminated against and not called in that case. But for this particular jury, that doesn't seem to be an issue. Shihab?
Miguel Marquez, thanks.
Michael Jackson confident as ever after the jury is selected. His trial now looms.
In some ways, Michael Jackson looked like he was ready to face off at high noon.
Let's go defense, chant the fans, and Jackson lawyer Tom Mesereau in open court said exactly where he's going to go, saying he will prove that the accuser's mother sought to profit from lying for years. The defense points to a 2001 case against J.C. Penney where the accuser's mother sued the department store for assault after her son was caught taking clothes without paying. Jackson's defense says one of its witnesses will testify that the accuser's mother taught her children to shoplift. The defense says it will prove that the accuser's mother wasn't, quote, in her right mind, unquote, during the time of the alleged incidents. They say they can prove she failed to take Zoloft, an antidepressant, and diazepam, an anti-anxiety drug. The defense says it will also ask the judge to allow the jurors to visit Jackson's Neverland Ranch. Both sides say opening statements will take about 2 hours each. Testimony...
Interviews and gag orders. The child molestation trial of Michael Jackson is set to start in little more than an hour. A jury of 8 women and 4 men is to decide the pop superstar's fate. And outside the courthouse, the winners of a lottery to attend the trial started turning up for their chance to witness the case. In Los Angeles, Miguel Marquez reports on what we can expect.
Michael Jackson confident as ever after the jury is selected. His trial now looms.
In some ways, Michael Jackson looked like he was ready to face off at high noon.
Let's go defense, chant the fans, and Jackson lawyer Tom Mesereau in open court said exactly where he's going to go, saying he will prove that the accuser's mother sought to profit from lying for years. The defense points to a 2001 case against J.C. Penney where the accuser's mother sued the department store for assault after her son was caught taking clothes without paying. Jackson's defense says one of its witnesses will testify that the accuser's mother taught her children to shoplift. The defense says it will prove that the accuser's mother wasn't, quote, in her right mind, unquote, during the time of the alleged incidents. They say they can prove she failed to take Zoloft, an antidepressant, and diazepam, an anti-anxiety drug. The defense says it will also ask the judge to allow the jurors to visit Jackson's Neverland Ranch. Both sides say opening statements will take about 2 hours each. Testimony could begin as early as Monday afternoon. Miguel Marquez, CNN, Los Angeles.
Came an hour and change late. Just about 3 minutes after, Judge Melville said he had to be here or else he would have revoked his $3 million bail. His attorney said that he had, quote, serious back problems. But Judge Melville said he still had to be here, was not mollified one iota. He came in with his posse, surrounded by bodyguards and handlers who held him up by his elbows. Then they opened the back of the trunk of the SUV, and to me this was interesting. There was a wheelchair in there. I thought they were actually going to unfold the wheelchair and he would get inside, but that didn't happen. He actually walked on his own power, albeit slowly, to the courthouse, looking somewhat disheveled, but made it in. Of course, today is a pivotal day. Testimony is continuing right now. This is the second day of testimony of his young accuser. It all boils down to this young man. If jurors believe him, that could be serious trouble for Michael Jackson. Right now, he is talking about receiving, quote, Jesus juice, talking about wine that he received from Michael Jackson on the way in a private jet to Miami and possibly on the way back as well. The attorney is asking him if he had ever had wine before, and he said no, he had only had it in church. And they're also talking about the Martin Bashir documentary, originally the BBC documentary, where the pair were seen holding hands, and the young accuser put his head on his shoulder. Said the reason he did it was because Michael Jackson was his very good friend, and he felt like it. He also said that when he was on that private jet with Jackson, that Jackson gave him a watch valued at some $75,000, also a jacket and some computer games to keep quiet about the Jesus juice. More testimonies expected all day today. Very, very dramatic day indeed. Toomey?
And Kimberly, what about the question of the delay at the beginning of the trial? How is the judge trying to ensure that this isn't going to sway the perception and perhaps result in some kind of favored perception of Jackson?
Well, he actually talked to jurors and cautioned them about ascribing any kind of guilt or innocence to this. He said, look, he had a medical condition. This is something that happened. I would do the same if it were you. So whether or not they will discount that, I mean, obviously jurors enter with their own feelings. They have said that they, of course, could be impartial in this trial. But this is the second time, remember, that he has been ill. Of course, he was hospitalized back during jury selection for experiencing flu-like symptoms.
All right, Kimberly Osias, thank you very much for the update. And if you'd like to go online to read up a little bit more about the Michael Jackson trial, log on to CNN.com. We have everything from up-to-the-minute details of the trial as well as profiles of some of the key players.
The prosecution ended its case by re-showing a videotape of Gavin Arvizo talking to police about his claims that the singer molested him. In an unexpected move, lawyers for Michael Jackson said they wouldn't be responding to his testimony by recalling witnesses. Let's now go live to Santa Maria in California, where the BBC's correspondent Daniela Relf is outside the court. Daniela, a rather surprisingly abrupt end to the trial.
Absolutely, it went against the grain, really, of the sort of discussions we'd heard over the past couple of days in court. But I think what we'd been hearing was basically a bit of bluff and posturing by both sets of lawyers here, as they both tried to make sure they had the upper hand here. So neither of them really quite wanted to tell the truth about what their strategy was. I think that's why we had this rather abrupt ending that took most of us by surprise. But as you say, it did end with this police video of Gavin Arvizo, Michael Jackson's accuser, this young boy, 13 years old at the time, sitting in a room on a sofa talking to the police in detail about these allegations of abuse he was making against Michael Jackson. He seemed very teenage in his demeanour. He was nervous. He seemed to mumble. But it was a pretty powerful end for the prosecution. It was a pretty convincing piece of tape.
And the judge said before the jury saw that tape, and we must remember they haven't seen this witness for 2 months, the judge said not to look for content but demeanour. What was he meaning by that?
That's right. He gave the jury some instructions before the tape was actually played on the big screen in the courtroom. And as you say, he said demeanour and attitude was the things they were looking for here. The reason the prosecution wanted to bring this tape in is because they were hoping that Gavin Arvizo's demeanour and attitude on this tape was going to be perhaps rather more sympathetic and vulnerable than when he was in the courtroom. And I think that was probably the case. So what the jury will have to try and do is not look at what he actually said, not look at the detail of the allegations and the consistency of his story, but just look at how he appeared. Did he seem to be telling the truth? Did this look like a teenage boy who'd been coached as to what to say? Did it look like somebody who'd learnt his words? And I have to say, watching it from the courtroom, looking at it, it did look pretty natural. He didn't seem to have learnt stuff. I think this looked like a 13-year-old boy discussing something that clearly he found rather difficult at times.
And we'll hear more next week. Danny, thank you very much indeed for joining us. A month-long...
The singer denies charges.